What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the 12-game main slate for Week 2 of the NFL season this upcoming Sunday. Week 1's behind us, and I think Brian and Moose did a good job of recapping everything that we learned on Tuesday night's $1 Million Mission. I hope you're able to check that out, and obviously hope that if you played Thursday Night Football between the Chiefs and the Chargers last night, that you had an extremely successful slate there as well. If not, we're here to get you ready for Sunday afternoon. Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals is one of my favorite overall plays on the slate as a touchdown plus favorite against the Dallas Cowboys this weekend. And the way that we like to start analyzing slates is by looking at who is highly favored in betting markets. This weekend, the Bengals are 7-point favorites against the Cooper Rush-led Dallas Cowboys. Prescott's injury has created a situation where the Bengals are now touchdown favorites on the road. In fact, Mixon, heading over to our Occupy model, is actually our third favorite running back on both DraftKings and FanDuel, and he's also projected for the third most weighted opportunities or touch opportunities in the entire league this week at the position. So a lot of things to like about Joe Mixon in Week 2 against Dallas. The Los Angeles Rams and the Denver Broncos are each 10-point favorites in their matchups with the Atlanta Falcons and the Houston Texans, respectively. Now, looking at our model here, you see we have Darrell Henderson as our 7th favorite play at the running back position, but just from a price standpoint, just $5,700 on DraftKings, $6,200 on FanDuel, $18 on Yahoo. There's a lot to like about Henderson here. Game script heavily likely to be in his favor, with the Rams favored by this many points against the Falcons. So if we hop back on over to DraftKings and we add Henderson to a lineup with Joe Mixon at running back, we have a lot of salary left to work with to fill out the rest of our lineup with just these two guys at the running back position. Now, you know by now, if you watched the Week 1 video and you looked at what to do in low-risk contests, we strongly prefer playing 3 high-volume running backs that are also favored when we can find them in low-risk contests. That means with the other 10-point favorite here on this slate, we want to get Javonte Williams potentially into the mix in low-risk contests at his high volume of snaps and opportunities for the Denver Broncos. Should have had a touchdown last week with that fumble on the goal line, taking that away from him, but 12 targets for Javonte Williams in the passing game, one of the most targeted players across the entire NFL in Week 1. Have to believe that'll come down a little bit and the rushes will go up in a more favorable game script environment for Williams, but it is clear by now that the Denver beat writers were largely correct, that the Denver coaching staff wants Williams to be the lead back for them this season, so he should be firmly on your radar in all contest types really, but especially in low-risk contests, where we're trying to just jam as many touches as possible into our low-risk lineups to try to get a high floor of opportunities to beat all of our opponents. Now, I mentioned the injury to Dak Prescott and how he'll be out for the foreseeable future. The clearest play on the board in low-risk contests, maybe all contests this week, is the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Just from the perspective of we know that this is exactly what everyone is going to do here on DraftKings. They have been mispriced at $2,200 against a backup quarterback as a touchdown plus favorite, probably by the time this kicks off, more than a touchdown. The Bengals have been mispriced at $2,200 here against backup quarterback Cooper Rush, and they're heavily likely to be the most popular defense that everybody plays. So they're a very fine play in low risk. They also meet our criteria of typically trying to play cheap defense to try and play better plays elsewhere in our lineups in low risk. So I have no problem with just going with the crowd here, if you will, and playing Bengals defense at this really, really low price. In low risk contests this week, there's not a lot to worry about at the quarterback position because we only really have 3 elite plays that are available to us. Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens, and Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos are the only super expensive quarterbacks that are available on the main slate. There are 2 cheap guys that I'm most interested in this week because of their rushing upside. One would be Trey Lance. The 49ers are favored by 8 points in their matchup with the Seattle Seahawks, and Trey Lance is going to have not just all of the, virtually all of the passing production in this offense as the quarterback, right? But he's also going to have a significant portion of the rushing production for the 49ers. 13 rush attempts for Lance last week in what was a very low volume of snaps overall for both the 49ers and Bears in a very low-scoring, low-paced game in a bad weather environment. Have to believe that things improve in San Francisco this weekend. Right next to him on the salary table, Marcus Mariota had 13 rush attempts for the Atlanta Falcons in his first start at quarterback in a couple of seasons here in the NFL. So he is also going to be someone that is somewhat intriguing as an underdog, especially against the Los Angeles Rams. He's going to be playing probably chasing points, probably going to be forced to be aggressive deep into this game. Got to like him at $5,600 in his matchup with the Rams. The other big favorite on this slate to consider at the running back position is the Cleveland Browns. Now, this whole Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt division of responsibilities and opportunities is probably going to be frustrating to deal with all year long, but this is the lowest total game on the slate. It is a 39.5 point total here on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Cleveland favored by 6.5 points. Saw what Nick Chubb did last week against Carolina with 22 rush attempts on the road, 141 yards on the ground, just one target in the passing game. I like to think of Nick Chubb as a little bit of Derrick Henry light. He's going to get a ton of opportunities here in the running game as a favorite against a really poor Jets team. So I think he's a really strong play. Probably even in high-risk contests because he's probably not going to be as popular as some of these other guys I've already talked about and slotted into this dummy lineup here on this video. But I really like what Nick Chubb brings to the table here. And then if for whatever reason this game is not going Cleveland's way, Kareem Hunt seems really interesting. He does seem to still have his third down /hurry-up offense role intact in Kevin Stefanski's offense for the Browns. And he does seem to get a little bit more work in the red zone. That's what it looked like in week 1 against the Panthers anyway. So there is some merit to considering Kareem Hunt in this matchup against the Jets also. A lot of low total games this week. The only high total games that are really available to us, the highest is going to be Las Vegas and Arizona. So you can expect a lot of people in high-risk contests to be stacking the Raiders and the Cardinals. There's also the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders at 48.5 points. The Los Angeles Rams and the Atlanta Falcons at just 46.5, but that is the third highest total on the board for the main slate. And then Denver and Houston at 46 points. So both the Rams and the Broncos as 10-point favorites are going to be playing in two of the highest raw overall point total environments, at least as far as betting markets are concerned. So that means we probably have to consider them for stacks. My 3 favorite stacks this week include those 2 games, the Rams and the Atlanta Falcons, and the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans. But my favorite stack on the board this week is actually the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. I really like the usage that we saw on the Miami side here for Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had a really strong game, playing just 67% of the snaps against the New England Patriots in week 1. Tyreek Hill ran around on 86% of Tua's dropbacks and was targeted on 38.7% of the routes that he ran. So it shouldn't be a surprise that he had 12 targets and 94 total yards against the New England Patriots. And this was a game that Miami did not really have to keep their foot on the gas for the entire way through. They pretty much handled New England pretty easily in week 1. So in a spot where they are now underdogs against the Baltimore Ravens, Tyreek Hill is probably going to be somebody that gets carried a little bit higher. So here in week 2, in a spot where the Dolphins are underdogs to the Baltimore Ravens, we are expecting an environment where Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense is going to carry this game and force Miami to play catch up. And Tyreek Hill is probably the best bet to see the benefit from that type of play for the Miami Dolphins. The other player to consider is Chase Edmonds, who had a pretty strong hold on the running back work for Miami in week 1 in a negative game script, so to speak, for the Miami Dolphins. Edmonds in his passing game role may play a larger part. 4 targets in a favorable game environment for Miami last week against the Patriots. In a game where they're chasing points, maybe this number starts to balloon a little bit. That's something that I'm willing to speculate on, especially in high-risk contests. Maybe if I was taking the Miami side of this stack, for example. But for the purposes of building out a high-risk lineup here, using my favorite low-risk plays at running back, my favorite low-risk defense, I'm going to stick with playing the Baltimore side here. So I've already got Tyreek Hill in my lineup. I want to see what we can do by trying to jam the highest usage Baltimore Raven players, which of course would be Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews at tight end, and Rashad Bateman at wide receiver. So with just $2,000 available to us, we cannot run this particular lineup. So at this amount of salary, we're learning together here, it'd be pretty difficult to run a 3-1 lineup in large field high-risk contests with Tyreek Hill at wide receiver and these 3 Ravens. So this is where the cheap piece theory comes into play, something we talk about in our NFL DFS strategy guide available at occupyfantasy.com. And I think what I would do here first is go with a drop down from Tyreek Hill to Chase Edmonds. So when we go all in on the passing offense of one side here, like I am with the Ravens in this particular build, we want to root for a situation in theory where the running back on the opposing team actually gets a lot of the production for the opponent. including the touchdowns, and that helps our 4 players that were playing from that game environment all rise together, right? And you'll see the salary, and you'll see the salary open up as I change some things around here. So I'm actually going to drop down from Javonte Williams to Chase Edmonds. I'm going to move Joe Mixon to flex because he plays in the late window to maximize my ability to have some late swap options. So by doing that, just those 2 things alone, I can now fit 2 more wide receivers around Rashad Bateman and make this game stack work. And this is a good segue to being able to talk about the rest of our favorite low-risk wide receivers in the Occupy model. Now, number one thing that we want to do in low-risk contests at wide receiver is maximize our target opportunities. And absolutely any idiot that hops on YouTube, a podcast, microphone, or whatever, right, can tell you that the 2 best wide receivers you should play right now are Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams and Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. Adams had a league-high 17 targets last week in a trailing game script for the Raiders, and we all know who Cooper Kupp is by now. So those 2 are in play in all contest types, and we're just going to leave them alone. I'm going to go over here to our far right column and sort by most projected targets here in the Occupy model. We think CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys is a really strong opportunity to lead this entire slate in targets. Lamb had 11 targets last week, but only 2 receptions. Not the strongest effort from the Dallas Cowboys across the board in week 1. Expect some positive regression for CeeDee Lamb, even with Cooper Rush under center. I think he's a great play at $6,900 in all contest types. You're going to get volume at this price that you just do not get to see usually here on DraftKings or FanDuel for that matter. So Lamb would be someone to consider. He'll be on the lower owned side though, so maybe he won't be as high of a priority as some of these other names that we have to go through. Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, who I mentioned earlier, Michael Pittman, and Christian Kirk in this divisional Colts versus Jaguars game. Both super interesting. Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Detroit Lions. This is where I would probably draw the line of these mid-range guys. There are a couple of cheap options that I'm interested in. One of which is CeeDee Lamb's teammate. It's Noah Brown. Noah Brown also had a ton of targets in that game for the Dallas Cowboys against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we don't think that there's going to be a shakeup here in the wide receiver room that will actually change the opportunity for Dallas. So we're still expecting CeeDee Lamb, Noah Brown, and Dennis Houston to be the main 3 wide receivers that Dallas deploys at home against the Bengals. So Noah Brown could be someone that is on your radar as well. Greg Dortch with the Arizona Cardinals in the highest total game on the slate against the Las Vegas Raiders. Had 7 targets last week as the had 7 receptions last week on his 9 targets for Arizona against the Kansas City Chiefs there. Have to believe he gets another chance to be the main slot wide receiver here against the Raiders. Hopefully this game goes better for Kyler Murray and a little bit more efficient. Let's look at what it would look like to try and finish off one of our cash lineups here. Take away these Miami and Baltimore plays. I do like Javonte and Henderson and Mixon here as a low-risk group. I'm going to slot in Trey Lance as a big favorite for the San Francisco 49ers as my low-risk quarterback. I'm going to play Davante Adams in this one. I'm going to get some nice correlation and play Greg Dortch as my cheap guy. At tight end, I like to talk about the players that are going to see a ton of snaps, run a ton of routes, and see a lot of opportunities that are not necessarily on the radar of most fantasy players. Everybody knows that Mark Andrews is going to be a good play this week. Everybody knows that Dalton Schultz is going to be one of the top 2 weapons for the Dallas Cowboys. Kyle Pitts had a bad game last week, but he's still going to be a reasonably popular play at the position because we know he's a top 2 receiving weapon for Marcus Mariota. Who are some other tight ends that are in play this week? One guy that I think is certainly worth considering is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. $3,600 here on DraftKings. Ran a route on 90% of Mac Jones' dropbacks, but was only targeted on 10% of his routes. So he may not be the best place to go. I actually think that one of the better plays overall on the entire slate is the opposing tight end in that game between the Patriots and the Steelers. It's Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth ran a route on about 80% of Trubisky's dropbacks last week and was targeted on over 29% of the routes that he ran in that game that went to overtime. So his raw numbers may look like they're high and you'd say, oh, well, that game just went to overtime, so that's why he had 10 targets. He was targeted on almost 30% of the routes that he ran when he was out there from start to finish. So Freiermuth is definitely up there as one of Trubisky's preferred targets here in this new look Steelers offense without Ben Roethlisberger. Got to like him at $4,400 here on DraftKings and just $5,400 over on FanDuel as a value play. Couple of other guys that stand out if you're looking to save all of the salary in the world. Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints had 5 targets last week. Everybody was talking about the Taysom Hill production when he's eligible at tight end and some of these providers here. But Juwan Johnson by far played the most for New Orleans. And so Juwan here could be one of the best true punts available at the tight end position at the $2,500 minimum on DraftKings. Leaves me $8,100 to play another wide receiver if I play Juwan Johnson. That means I can play basically anyone here not named Cooper Kupp here in a low-risk lineup. It means I could play Cooper Kupp instead of Davante Adams as well if I wanted to. So there are plenty of paths that you can go by using some of these cheap tight ends that I've talked about here in this video. I'm personally excited about week 2. You should be excited too. We're looking forward to I'm personally excited about week 2. I hope you all are as well. Keep an eye out for some of the showdown content that we have for you. There's going to be a showdown plug for the Sunday Night Football game between the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Keep an eye out for the daily plug, which will be posted at OccupyFantasy.com this Friday evening. There we will go over all of our favorite plays in both low and high risk contests, and we will outline exactly how to play our favorite game stacks of the week in there as well, which contests to play, which satellites we're targeting specifically. Should be a really good read for you. We really hope you check that out. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We know that 60% of our viewers here are not subscribed. We would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, because then you will know exactly when new content is available for you to consume about daily fantasy football, MMA, whatever you want from Occupy Fantasy. That's the best way for you to know when it's published right away. Good luck this week, and we will talk to you next week for week 3 in the NFL.